kids in two of the world's largest cities. We're going to dive into that a little bit more right now. I am sitting here with Splash founder and executive director Eric Stowe and Neil Myrick, the global head of the Tableau Foundation. And we thought, spend a little time talking about it. Eric, the most logical place to start. Tell us about Splash. How did you get started?
Sure. So Splash is a safe water organization. We work with governments in countries to design water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health programs. So what that means is we work in places like schools or hospitals, shelters, or orphanages, and we make sure that while kids are there, they're not getting sick from the water that they're drinking. We're making sure that they are washing their hands, that they have child-friendly toilets, and that girls over the age of 10 actually have appropriate menstrual health support. And that means the infrastructure and the software to make sure that they actually can appropriately use menstrual or have menstrual hygiene management.
Perfect. That's great. How long has the organization been around?
We started in 2007.
Great.
Our biggest program at the time was working with the Chinese government to make sure that every orphanage in China would eventually get safe water. And last year we were finally able to announce completion of that project. It took about 5 years longer than we initially projected. But in sum, it was 1,100 orphanages across 31 provinces. It was a big, big program.
That's great. And Splash has always been an organization committed to transparency and using technology, isn't that right?
That is.
That's right. So tell me a little bit about data and how Splash is using data today.
Against data before we engage with Tableau?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, we're still struggling with being able to have data that drives a lot of our major decision making, but in the last year, especially after the partnership that we started with the foundation, we're light years ahead of where we were, and yet we're still streets away from where we want to be. But the goal is that we're able to show from the government level down to the school level and eventually down to the child level the gains being made because of our intervention. Whether that means that the water quality is safe continually, whether that means that toilets are functional and used, whether that means that whatever the particular metric is, we want to be able to share that from the person level all the way to the school level, all the way to the government level.
That's fantastic. So, Neil, I'll turn to you. We've worked with Splash for a few years now. How did this get started?
Well, that's really, I think, one of our best foundation stories. So we offer a program that allows small nonprofits to get free copies of Tableau, and Splash got a couple copies through that program. And then we have another program that allows nonprofits to get help from Tableau volunteers. They offer the nonprofits to help to use Tableau. And so Splash got a couple copies of software, connected with our Tableau service core, got help from a volunteer, started figuring out how to use the data. And then about a year later, we were doing a grant cycle. And the volunteer who had actually been working with Splash suggested that we look at Splash and consider them for a grant. And when we dove in and did some due diligence, we just saw like a huge amount of opportunity there. So we gave them another small grant to iteratively sort of increase their skills and capacity. And then I remember one day Eric calls me, and he had been watching what we're doing with our Visualize No Malaria campaign and how that has been scaling up. And Eric had this idea around launching a similar campaign focused on bringing clean water to kids. And after some dialogue, thought it was a great idea, and that has us sitting here today making $1 million commitment to scale their work into 2 very big cities.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Eric, 2 very big cities. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Calcutta, what's going on in Addis Ababa. I mean, the need, you've been there, you've been on the ground. Can you describe what's the situation at most of these schools?
Sure. Maybe I'll pull it out just a little. So we initially launched this program called Project WISE, Wash in Schools for Everyone. And WASH is the acronym for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. And the focus is on providing every single school in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which is about almost 500 schools, and every single school in Kolkata, India, which is about 1,100, full water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health services.
Yep.
1,600 schools, 1 million kids, 5 years, which on the surface alone is already complex. But what we said from the beginning is we had to be in concert and full collaboration with the government to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So we required the government be able to not only financially buy in, but have the will and the drive to be able to do this in the short amount of time that we're talking about. So the initiative scaled, as I said earlier, from the kid to the school to government, and that's why I think Tableau and Splash fell in love, is how in fact do we involve beneficiaries and constituents into the data process at large so that they can actually see their own data about their own story, from individual to school to district, city, etc. So the goal is 5 years, 1 million kids, 1,600 schools, with the intent that upon completion or nearing completion, we would actually start our work in a secondary city. And before completion there, we'd start in a tertiary city so that in the next 10 years, we would require the government to provide more and more financing each subsequent city toward the goal that by the third city, Splash as an international organization is actually exiting. And that the Splash local organization would actually continue growing. So Splash Ethiopia would continue on in perpetuity without us. Splash India the same. So the goal is planned obsolescence. How in fact do you actually build up, use international philanthropy to build out the market so that you can actually draw down the need for international philanthropy over time.
Yep, absolutely. Hope you're putting yourself out of business.
Exactly.
Which is why we need this data.
Yep.
If we're not proving impact, if we're not proving health impact, increased number of days that kids are attending school, and especially on girls in particular, like this doesn't have the staying power that we need to prove out so that the government actually funds these things at scale.
That's fantastic. So take me inside one of your team meetings in Addis Ababa.
Sure.
You know, you've got data systems in place. You're looking at where's there a need, where there's infrastructure, where that infrastructure needs maintenance. How has it been building kind of a culture of data inside your team?
Slow going. A lot slower than I think we would have imagined. But when you look at the architecture from the frontline enumerators who are taking the data all the way to the tail end when we're getting the visualization through Tableau, it's a long and meandering process. And getting even just the compliance on the front end to make sure that water quality tests, the inspection on the infrastructure, the new M&E surveys, that everything is actually going in, it's been really complex. Making sure that the data that is going in is true, correct, and right is also complex. So we're still, as I said, on the front end. It's a 5-year program. We're in year 1, which is kind of piloting what does this look like at scale, and next year is the year that we need to be like codified and routinized in all of our processes, including data.
That's it.
So I can't answer your question yet, but this time next year I'm going to have an incredible answer.
And we are going to hold you to it.
We will come back.
We will come back. I would love to be sitting at TC20 having that conversation about how successful it's been. That's fantastic. How did you land on these 2 cities?
We had been working in both for quite some time. So when 5 years ago, Splash was in 8 countries.
Yeah.
We were in China, Cambodia, Ethiopia, Nepal, on and on. And really, if you look at kind of the bang for buck, feature values matrix of if we can invest a limited amount of resources, where are we going to see the greatest gain? It was India and Ethiopia out of the portfolio that we were working in. We thought very long and heavy about that decision to actually downsize the number of countries we're in so that we could start to do excellent work in these 2 countries in particular.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So when you're having conversations with government officials, you know, what's the sort of data, what are the insights that they're looking for to make their decision?
It's the before and after, most importantly, at least in the conversations that I've had with ministry officials and Department of School Education officials. They want to know what the conditions were prior to, post-intervention, and then what does that look like over time. So that's infrastructure. But for us, most importantly, are health gains for kids, educational days gained for girls in particular. So those are the 2 that we want to most focus on, while the other side is more output-based, functionality-based. The outcome side of it is the stuff that it's going to take a long time to prove.
Yeah. And
it's not overnight.
Certainly isn't. And you're sharing that data in real time or close to real time. You've got your impact report up on splash.org.
We will be.
Some interesting stuff there.
Yes.
So, you know, we've talked very clinically about the work. If doing this for 10 years, I mean, there have to be a few moments that have been inspiring, moving, challenging. You know, what sort of stands out in your mind when you think about your experience with Splash and sort of the things you have in your mind when you're thinking about the data systems that are going to enable this work to scale significantly?
I'll take it in an odd direction. Yesterday I got a note from one of our staff, one of our Seattle staff who's in Ethiopia right now, and it was the first time we've ever done a janitor training. So this is actually about an adult, but it's the first time that we've really focused on the janitors who are cleaning out the toilets. Like, I don't care what the toilet looks like when you construct it, how high quality it is, if it's not being cleaned over time, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And our staff was there with our local trainers working with this group of 10 janitors. And one of the quotes from one of the women leaving was, "This is the first time I've seen, or I've felt that I was seen at the school." And it's just this moment from seeing data that things aren't necessarily working. Our behavior change programs to train kids on how to wash their hands, to work with administrators, there was something missing. And we started focusing on the janitors. And by extension of that, there's just this moment of clicking for the janitors at large that they are a piece of this larger solution. Yeah. They are integrated into the school community as a whole. And our ability to shift and pivot and focus on them, part of that is derived from the data that we're now starting to see about lack of success in some of the areas that we want to see. But that one is sticking with me heavily. I thought about it all last night, all this morning, and all today. Like, this woman saying, "This is the first time I felt seen." Yeah. She's worked at that school for years, I'm sure, but this is the first moment that she felt respected and valued and part of the whole. And I think we've got incredible potential and momentum on this particular topic, and it's because we're starting to watch and listen to the data in new ways.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that. It actually reminds me of something of Neil you say all the time about data is not an extractive industry.
Yeah.
Could you explain that for the folks at home? You know, what is data as extractive, and what are we doing different?
Great question. Historically, what we've seen is when a funder or a government or a nonprofit goes in to work in a low-income community or country, they collect a lot of data, typically for the purposes of reporting back to the funder. And so what happens is all these data get collected about a community and kind of sucked out of the community, and then the community never gets it back. And so one thing that was really attractive about partnering with Splash was this notion of sustainability and delivering data back to a community in a way that they can see and understand. So it's their data, and they can use their data to make decisions about their community. And that's something that we really try to focus on in all of our grants is not only are we collecting the data we need to make better decisions, but how can we put it back in the hands of the local people to use for their own purposes.
Yeah. And I would imagine that's something that's coming up often, in conversations with government, conversations with your teams, partners.
I think it's more advantageous for the business at large to be able to show to the government the change over time, to show cost efficiency, to show health impact, to show days of education increased. But more excitingly, I think if we're able to actually show some of the kids in the hygiene clubs, the changes in their school, to show the janitors, like the change in their school over time, that would be incredible.
And it's their work.
That'd be incredible, right?
Right.
Like if you think of your general utility bill, that you can actually see how you did against where you were last year, or how you do against your average neighbor, district to district, county to county, et cetera. We believe that we can show not only government where they're at, but schools where they're at against their peers. But more importantly, and as I said, more excitingly, what would it look like if we're actually showing the kids, the teachers, and right now, most especially the janitors, like how their schools are faring because of their component piece of this, that they are a part of the solution. This is not an international NGO coming in, dropping something off, and
walking away.
This is a long-term engagement for the betterment of these schools and these kids' health, and they are component actors in this. Like, they are a part of the process and part of the solution. So that's what I'm terribly excited about. We just don't know how to do that yet. So this is where I'm going to be soliciting you both after this. Like, how do we get those visuals that are most compelling into the hands of those that are most important?
Absolutely. And what I love about this is I've been talking with my team lately about the fact that we have to start doing the work we do in social impact. We have to really start talking about the people behind the data, because that's really what it's all about. And when you told me the story this morning about the janitor,
I've been telling everybody, by the way.
Yes, I know,
cool.
exactly. It's everywhere. If she can see herself in the data, I mean, that's mind-blowing, right? So somebody working for years, not being seen, And if she can actually see the real live impact that her work has on the outcomes for the kids, I can't imagine what that must be like.
And you see that you're an integral piece of the overall progression.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. So we are dedicated to showing the government, and we need to if we ever want this to scale.
Yep.
But I think the organization at large is far more committed to figuring out how do we actually unlock that voice for the kids that we do this work for.
Yeah. I mean,
And the janitors that we do this work with.
Exactly.
and speaking of the help, you've had some help the last couple of years through Zen Master volunteers. And could you talk a little bit about?
And Neil can help me on the technical side of this because I'm least proficient at this table. But we have had so much help in the last, I'd say the last 10 months in particular.
Yep.
So you and I met, we were in London at some point late last year.
Yeah.
We were talking about the change that had to happen at Splash from, as I said earlier, from the enumerator with the tablet to the point of use in our office to actually start to discern what we're doing well, what we're not. And so we actually had several people come in across a very short amount of time to redesign entirely the tech stack from that front point of introduction to the downstream point of use.
Yep.
Maybe you could speak a little bit more to what that actually entailed, because you are a little closer to it. But we had, I can think across the last few months, we've had at least 6 different people in our office helping us focus on that, like locked into rooms, late night coding, Red Bulling it out, and like doing immeasurable good for us. We just couldn't have done this without that support. And so you were able to bring in a whole host of competent actors to be able to propel us forward in a way that we could not have done on our own.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was, again, it was a couple of Zen Masters, Tomas Foldy.
Yes.
Terry Dares was a former member of the Tableau team, and they took the flag somewhere interesting recently, didn't they? They went up a mountain.
Thierry did.
Splash flag, yeah.
Yeah, Thierry took that flag all the way to the top of Everest.
It was pretty great.
When we had someone from Star Schema in our office for several weeks just last month. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Folks have really rallied around
Alteryx,
project
Star Schema, oh my gosh.
Fantastic.
It's really it's just the amazing thing about the Tableau ecosystem is, I remember actually I had lunch with Thierry, and he said he'd be interested in getting involved in a project, and I connected him to Splash, and literally 4 days later he was leading the project. Yeah. We called Tomas Foldy at Star Schema, Zen Master. He got engaged, put his staff on.
Mapbox.
And Mapbox, Alteryx got involved, and it just was remarkable how the community came together. And I think it was from designing the stack to full implementation was like 10 weeks.
Wow.
It was remarkable. And you don't see that anywhere, ever. So
I've talked about that here a few times, like I know what I'm talking about, and everybody's astonished, so I know that it's astonishing.
Yeah, it's
exactly. You do a good job.
That's true.
It's your enthusiasm.
Yeah. It's incredible. It really is incredible. And there's a moment in time, again, a year, maybe 2 out, where we're able to show these big, weighty reams of data in totally, navigable, discernible ways to government and to schools that we just could not have done without this kind of support.
That's fantastic.
And you all rallied for it. I mean, we had no clue how to get there. And I remember calling you, saying, we really need your help. This is where I need that moment for you to lean into this and step up to it. And
I remember that.
It was phenomenal, and it was immediate. Like, you rallied so quickly.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
It's an important project. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, for the folks watching around the world, what can they do? What can they do to help? Where's a good place to start? Maybe it's learning about Splash or possibly getting involved. I mean, where do you need help?
This is where you're going to have to edit. I'm sorry. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not the technical.
No, that's fine.
We can start that part over. Obviously, going to splash.org to learn a lot more. And then, obviously, within this ecosystem, talking to our impact and evaluation team. They'll be able to figure out what resources we need and if those gaps are filled or not. And
yeah, that'd be great. And for folks who are here at TC, we have a pretty significant Splash setup down here.
Yeah.
Come see some of the infrastructure. See some of the syncs that you all put in the schools and get a chance to interact with some of the visualizations. You'll notice we are all drinking out of some very handsome Mirror water bottles here. Every bottle we sell, a portion of the proceeds goes to Splash to support this work. I'm going to thank you. Not just for being here today and helping tell the story, but really for the work that you and the team are doing. You have a terrific team here, Addis, Calcutta, Nepal. Just wonderful folks working for you. So this is our opportunity to really say thank you for everything you're doing.
I appreciate that. I'll just reframe it that this is the work that we are doing.
Yeah.
This partnership has been really deep and synergistic, I think. And I think the things that we're going to learn, you'll be able to pass off to other grantees in the future. But yeah, this run together is together.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, closing thoughts. Anything stand out from your first TC experience?
It's way bigger than I thought. And I do just want to say, so I was able to pull Adam aside yesterday and let him know that if the foundation is representative of Tableau at large, that he's an incredibly rich and lucky man. The care that we've received, how proactive and responsive and responsible and quick everybody has been at the foundation has been unlike anything that we see. Truly, you're an outlier. And I hope that more of the sector moves in that direction, but it's completely uncommon for us.
Yeah.
We actually don't know how to respond to it at times. Like when we write and ask a question, it's responded. When we ask for support, it's there. And we ask for connections, they're timely. It's just, you're a very odd bunch. And I say that with total love and affection.
That's good. Well, Neil, I'm blushing. I don't know.
I am, yeah.
It's amazing.
Any final thoughts before we say goodbye to everybody?
I just think the partnership with Splash is, for us, it's an opportunity to have impact at scale. And we just could not be more proud to be partners of such a great organization with great leadership. So
you'll be more proud. Give us 2 years. We're not there yet. You'll be more proud.
I won't be fully proud. I'll just be partially proud.
When you see the change that happens at the government level, the school level, and the child level, because of the data that we're able to pull together, you'll be damn proud.
Yeah, and we'll get you on the main stage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right now, you can be sort of proud.
Okay.
Well, I have no idea how to follow that up. So with that, I'm going to thank everybody for taking some time to talk today. Again, hashtag Data19 on social media. Go to splash.org to learn more about Eric and the organization's work. Tableau.com/foundation to learn more about Tableau Foundation and all the work we're doing in global health, poverty programs, climate action, and equity work. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your Tableau conference.